It's about 30 to 45 seconds. We'll start. Be quiet, and then you'll hear me begin the conversation. Hello, my name is Chris, and I'm the moderator for tonight's telephone town hall. Tonight we're going to be discussing the facts behind Proposition 105, which is on your ballot this November. If you have any questions tonight during the call, we'd love to take them. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have a question, all you have to do is press 0. We're going to be joined by 3 great speakers on tonight's call. Lori Kester, who is a farmer, Chad Vorthman, who works with the Colorado Farm Bureau, and Dana Bieber, who is an advocate for the No on 105 Coalition. So for those of you that are just joining us tonight, again, you are joining a live telephone town hall. We're going to be discussing the facts behind Proposition 105, which is on your November ballot. If you'd like to ask a question at any time, all you have to do is press 0 on your phone to ask your question. Again, press 0 on your phone to ask your question. And we've got 3 great speakers tonight. Dana Bieber, who is an advocate for the No on 105 Coalition. Chad Vorthman, who is a farmer from the Colorado Farm Bureau. And our first speaker tonight actually is Lori Kester. Lori is a 4th-generation family farmer, and she grew up on a farm in the San Luis Valley raising alfalfa, hay, barley, oat hay, and winter wheat. Lori, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone?
All right. Well, thank you. I'm very pleased to be on this call tonight. I am representing my family farm and our neighboring farmers, and we're very concerned about how Proposition 105 is pretty poorly written. It requires foods to be labeled as produced with genetic engineering, but does not say how much or what ingredients are to be labeled. It sets a very extreme 0 threshold, so farmers would be required to purchase separate equipment if they had to segregate their non-GM crops from their GM crops, and it would make it a pretty burdensome added expense on farmers and ranchers around the state. It doesn't really, we don't feel that it's necessary. We already have a label that says this is certified organic, and so if a person wanted to make sure that they weren't eating GM foods, they could buy the certified organic label. So I definitely feel like this is unnecessary and very misleading. So I'm pleased to be joining this call tonight. As I said, I represent a family farm, and we are pretty concerned about what this is going to do to agriculture.
Great. Thanks, Lori. Again, for those of you who just joined us, my name is Chris, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's telephone town hall. We're going to be discussing the facts behind Proposition 105, which is on your ballot this November. If you want to ask a question at any time, all you have to do is press 0. The first speaker we heard was Lori Kester, and now we're going to hear from our second speaker, Chad Vorthman. Chad is a 4th-generation farmer. He grew up on a farm in southwest Iowa, and he's worked for the Colorado Farm Bureau for over 10 years. The Farm Bureau is actually the largest organization of farmers and ranchers in Colorado and in the U.S. Chad?
Thanks, Chris, and I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight to share some information about this important proposition. This will clearly hurt our family farmers all across Colorado. Many of our farmers in our state grow genetically engineered and non-genetically engineered crops, and this is going to be very costly to our farmers out there because they'll have to install separate and costly systems. This is because of that 0 threshold level that Lori mentioned just a second ago. They'll have to install separate systems when they're growing, harvesting, packaging, processing, and transporting. This initiative is also going to create more state bureaucracy and just lead to higher food costs. The government's going to have to monitor tens of thousands of food labels at thousands of stores across our state and farms and food processing facilities. There's no end to what this could cost taxpayers. So I encourage you to join our farmers and vote no on Proposition 105.
Thanks, Chad. Again, for those of you that are just joining us, my name is Chris. I'm the moderator for tonight's telephone town hall where we'll be discussing the facts behind Proposition 105. If you have a question at any time, you can press 0 on your phone to ask that question. You can also go to factsabout105.com to learn more. Our next speaker tonight will be Dana Bieber. Dana is an advocate for the No on 105 Coalition, which represents over 60,000 farmers, ranchers, consumers, businesses, and taxpayers across Colorado. And she's studied the public policy impacts of mandatory single-state labeling propositions such as this one. Dana?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this telephone town hall so we can talk about Proposition 105 and share some information about this measure. You know, one of the fundamental problems with Proposition 105 is it fails on its underlying promise to provide consumers with reliable information about what's in their food. And in fact, it does the exact opposite. It provides misleading and inaccurate labels. You know, some examples of that, and Lori touched on them, but there's so many exemptions and special loopholes contained in Proposition 105. Consumers looking for information about whether their food contains GMO ingredients in them won't receive that information under this labeling measure, unlike the two current nationwide labeling systems that we have. For consumers who are looking for foods without GMO ingredients, they can do so by choosing either the organic or non-GMO labeled food products. Those are 100% reliable and accurate, and they don't contain all the special exemptions and loopholes as contained in Proposition 105. So Lori, Chad, and I look forward to having the discussion with you tonight and answering any questions that you may have on this measure. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. And again, I'm Chris. I'm the moderator for tonight's telephone town hall about Proposition 105. If you have a question, please press 0 on your phone. And we really want to encourage all of you that have your ballots there in front of you at your kitchen table, somewhere in the house, to take a moment, fill them out, and send them back. We really want to make sure everyone gets their voice heard. And if you have a question tonight, you should go ahead and press 0 to ask that question. Our first question comes from Irene. Irene, are you there?
I am here.
Great. Go ahead and ask your question, Irene.
Okay, the question I want to know, who in the world is putting all these, you have to vote for this and vote for that, just like 105. Who is profiting from this ballot stuff that they're putting on? Could you tell me that?
Irene, this is Dana, and I'd be happy to answer that question for you. You know, Proposition 105 is a recycled measure that's been all over the western part of the United States. In fact, it was taken by an outside group. They took it to California, or actually it started in Oregon years ago. Oregon voters rejected it. Then it went to California. California voters rejected it. And then just last year, Washington voters rejected it. And so they've recycled it, and they've brought it now to Colorado. But the fundamental problems remain the same, Irene. It's just still this flawed labeling measure that doesn't provide accurate and reliable information. But what it does do, on the other hand, it does increase grocery costs for all Colorado families, and it hurts Colorado farmers and ranchers. And that's why this coalition has come together to reject this costly and misleading labeling measure. And it's why we're urging a no vote.
Thanks, Dana. And when you vote no, please just mark it on your ballot. Fill out your ballot all the way down, and then drop it in the mail. Your ballots have to arrive to the election offices by Election Day. So vote no on 105 on your ballot, and then drop it in the mail. We want to hear from you, so if you do have a question you want to ask, press 0 on your phone. But I actually have a question I want to ask you. I want to ask you first when you plan to vote. So if you plan to fill out your ballot and send it back in this week, press 1 on your phone. If you plan to fill out your ballot and send it in next week, press 2 on your phone. If you plan to wait until right before the election, press 3 on your phone. And if you have already returned your ballot, press 4. Again, press 1 if you plan to fill it out and send it in this week. 2 if you're going to send it in next week. 3 if you'll send it in that last weekend right before the election. And press 4 if you've already returned your ballot. Again, we want to hear from you, so press 0 if you have a question. Our next question comes from James in Greenwood Village. James, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. I'd like to know why. Okay. Yes, I'd like to know why a better job hasn't been done for the no on 105 on explaining things like genetically modified foods have been around for, about 5,000 years already. So they've already been eating it. And If they have a problem with it, foods got to them when they were at a very early developmental stage, which is why we have these crazy ballot measures like 105.
Great. That sounds like a perfect question for Chad. Chad, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, James, you're right. We have been genetically modifying foods by breeding them and by selecting for the best traits. This is just using better technology to do that. We probably haven't been talking about that because Prop 105 talks about the labeling of foods, and we really see how this hurts family farmers by adding additional paperwork for them. This hurts Colorado farmers because it puts them at a competitive disadvantage by making them comply with laws and regulations that our neighboring state farmers don't have to comply with. And we compete with those farmers every year when we harvest our crops. And just adding one more regulation is really hard on our family farmers.
Thanks, Chad. Again, if you have a question you want to ask, all you have to do is press 0. Our next question comes from another Irene. Irene, you had a question you wanted to ask tonight?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and ask your question, ma'am.
Well, why do our farmers have to work so hard? We get less water down here in southeastern Colorado. And why do we not get what we need here? I know Pueblo County, Crowley County, they sold all their water, and we're at the last end to
Thank you, Irene.
Dam here.
Yep. Hey, 105 it claims to label foods containing GMOs, but it doesn't live up to those claims. It's not going to tell consumers information that they might want to know. It actually confuses consumers, and I think a good example is when you look at crops like sugar beets. We grow a lot of sugar beets in Colorado. Now we know that when you extract sugar from a sugar beet, there's no genetic material. There's no DNA left. We know this because you can't plant sugar and try to grow sugar. That will have to be labeled, even though it doesn't contain any GMOs in the finished product. On the other hand, when you look at cheese, we know 80 to 90% of cheese contains a enzyme that's derived from genetic engineering. However, this has a laundry list of exemptions where 2/3 of the foods sold will be exempted, and cheese is one of those foods. So as a consumer, you won't know going to the grocery store which foods contain GMOs and which don't. And in the end, it doesn't matter if the food has to be labeled or not labeled when it gets to the grocery store. This is going to hurt our family farmers because it puts the additional burden on them because they'll have to track that food. They'll have to segregate and separate it no matter which end product that food is going to. Thank you, Irene.
I'd like to speak to this a little bit too. This is Lori Kester. I think it's really great that you're paying attention to the farmers down there in southwest Colorado, and that's one of the reasons why I am so concerned about this initiative is that it's going to be detrimental to farmers. It's going to make it, as you said earlier, it's going to make it really difficult for Colorado farmers to be able to compete with neighboring states as they try to market their food. If we are the only ones that have to have this label on our food. And so I really appreciate that you're aware of that. I think that's really great, and it's a great question.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Chad. Again, we want to hear from you, so if you have a question, press 0. If you just joined us, the first poll question we asked tonight was, when do you plan to vote no on 105 and send in your ballot? If you're going to do it this week, push 1 on your phone. If you're going to do it next week, push 2. If you're going to wait until just right before the election, push 3. And if you've already returned your ballot, go ahead and push 4. Our next question comes from Claudia in Woodland Park. Claudia, are you there?
Yes, I was wondering if you could just give a quick background on what the dangers of GMOs are in food. I'm not that familiar with it. Or where would I go to find out?
Claudia, a good question, one that we hear every once in a while. There really are no dangers in GMO foods. They're probably one of the most studied foods that we consume. We've been producing GMOs in our foods for 20 to 25 years in the United States, And there's been more than 1,700 studies that have said time and time again these foods are safe. These are studies that are done by our own FDA, USDA, the Royal Medical Society across the Atlantic Ocean, the European Union. They've studied them very heavily, and they've all come to the same conclusion that GMOs are safe. And they're nutritionally the same as their conventional and organic counterparts. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. Again, if you have a question, all you have to do is press 0 to ask your question. Next up, we're going to go to Ann in Aurora. Ann, are you there? Ann, are you there?
Yes. There was a beep on the line, and I didn't hear who you were talking to.
No problem. Go ahead and ask your question.
Who brought this up again when we already have some regulations that go all across the states, the same thing? Who brought this separate thing up again here for Colorado?
Hi, Ann. This is Dana. I'd be happy to answer that question for you. You know, it's the same out-of-state group that's been shopping this around to other states. I mean, it's the funders to the Yes Side are, for example, Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps. It's a company based out of California. And there's a company called Mercola, and they sell, among other things, supplements and things like that, based out of Illinois. And it's groups like that who have really kind of brought on this Proposition 105 to Colorado just because, frankly, it's been rejected in every other ballot initiative state that they've taken it to. Voters have voted it down for the same reasons that we believe Proposition 105 deserves a no vote, because it's costly, it's misleading, and it hurts Colorado farmers. One point you mentioned also, Ann, were the existing regulations, and I think that's really important to mention again, because there are consumers who prefer to choose foods without GMO ingredients in them for whatever reason. And for them, there's not one but two different nationwide labeling standards that they can look for. They can look for either the organic or the non-GMO label. Both are reliable, both are accurate, and neither of them contain all these exemptions and these loopholes that you heard both Chad and Lori mention earlier. So we already have a system in place. Proposition 105 brings nothing but misleading information, and that's why we believe it deserves a no vote.
Great. Thanks so much. Again, press 0 if you want to ask a question tonight. You can also go to factsabout105.com, and we also encourage you to vote no on this proposition, fill out your ballot, and send it back in. Our next question is going to come from Red in Yuma. Red, are you there?
Yes. I had more of a comment than a question, in that I don't think a lot of consumers realize that so many of our foods come from out of state, and there will be a shortage of products being available in our stores, just simply because they cannot cater to our laws and regulations. So, I mean, cheeses, gourmet items, vegetables may not just be available like they are now and always have been.
Red, this is Chad. I think you're exactly right. I know this for sure. You're not going to see more food choices when you go to the grocery store. We heard from, we were talking down in Pueblo this week, and we heard from a food distributor down there that said he distributed in all of the lower 48 states. And he said, this passes and it goes through, it would be easier for him to avoid Colorado than it would be to continue distributing. He has choices, and he can make the choice not to distribute in Colorado. That leads to lower food choices. That leads to other problems that just end up hurting Coloradans and driving up our food costs. That's one area that is really misleading about this initiative is they're claiming that the food costs won't go up, but we know that they will. We've seen it in other countries when they've implemented the same kind of system. We've seen it in Europe. Their food prices are way higher than ours are. Thank you for your question.
Great. And again, if you have a question you want to ask, just go ahead and press 0 on your phone. Next up, we're going to take Stephen from Red Feather Lakes. Stephen, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. I appreciate this. Hey, I'm all in favor of genetically modifying food to make it nutritionally better. But just to make it a profit motive like Monsanto, I'm totally opposed to that. I'd like you to address that. And also natural foods. Hemlock is natural, but I wouldn't want to eat the stuff.
Hey, Stephen, this is Dana. I'd be happy to address that question. I know Chad has a lot to offer on this, but I'll just touch on some of the things that you mentioned about this. You know, GMO foods are the most studied food in our entire food system ever, and there have been countless scientific and medical organizations that have studied these foods. And not only do they say that they are safe, but they are identical or more nutritional than their counterparts. So that's one part I want to address with the nutrition. I know Chad has other points to make on this.
Yeah, I think from a farmer standpoint, what we hear from our farmer members is the fear with this initiative is if it passes, it'll limit opportunities for future crop advances. You know, Colorado is a very unique state in that we're a headwater state. So all the water or all the snow that falls in the mountains, that's nearly all the water that we get. Nothing else flows into Colorado. And having GMO technology that increases nutrition, that increases drought tolerance, that really helps Colorado producers, you know, grow their crops, keep our food local, as well as delivering water to cities as they need it, and they're growing as well.
Great. Again, if you have a question that you want to ask, all you have to do is press 0. We actually want to hear from you again. We want to ask our second poll question of the night, and that's what action are you willing to take to help protect Colorado farmers? Push 1 on your phone if you'll encourage your friends and family to vote no on Proposition 105. Push 2 if you'll write a letter to the editor about voting no on Proposition 105. Push 3 if you'll share information on Facebook or Twitter about why we should vote no on Proposition 105. Or press 4 if you're willing to do all of the above. Again, 1, to encourage your friends and family to vote no on 105. 2, to write a letter to the editor about voting no on Proposition 105. 3, to share information on Facebook or Twitter about why we should vote no. 4, all of the above. Our next question comes from Beverly in Littleton. Are you there, Beverly?
Yes, I am. What I'm interested in is the gluten-free ingredients that are in food. Is this something that they'll be putting in, or is this something altogether different?
Hi, Beverly. This is Dana. I'll answer that question about the gluten-free label. No, Proposition 105 doesn't have anything to do with the gluten-free and gluten ingredients. But the point you make about it, I think, is an important one in that there are consumers, for example, out there who are looking for foods that are gluten-free. Some of them do it for just personal reasons. A lot of people do it for health and medical reasons. So it's important. And like all labels, they need to be reliable and accurate. When you go to the grocery store and you're looking for a product that's gluten-free, you need that label to be 100% accurate and reliable. That's where Proposition 105 fails consumers who are looking for foods without GMO ingredients in them. Because you can go to the grocery store and you can pick up a product. For example, let's say you pick up some meat or dairy products that even though it came from animals that were fed GE grains and injected with GE medications, it wouldn't be labeled only because it gets a special exemption under Proposition 105. Same thing with cheese and cheese products. So you go to the grocery store, you pick up one of those products, you don't see a label on it, and you think, it doesn't contain any GMO ingredients in it. Well, actually, you'd be mistaken because this label will mislead you because it gets so many special exemptions and loopholes, and that's why we believe it deserves a no vote.
Again, if you have a question you want to ask, go ahead and press 0. Our next question comes from Richard in Grand Junction. Richard, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Great, go ahead.
Basically, it's like whenever I go to the store, basically it helps me know what to eat so that way I can stay in shape because I like to ride from Junction to Denver on my road bicycle, and the food label helps me keep in shape. So I voted yes for it, but it's like if next year if I would need to vote no for it, why would I want to vote no if reading the label helps me know what's in it? So
sure,
I know I'm not eating some fattening steak or fattening burger rather than healthy burger. Why should I vote no for this when it helps me?
You know, Richard, you ask a great question. I have a road bike and do some road cycling as well. I rode and pedaled the plains this year. I don't think this label is going to help you, because it does create a double standard when it comes to labeling. It arbitrarily is going to exempt 2/3 of all food sold. So meat, milk, and eggs from animals that were fed genetically engineered grains is all exempt. Cheese is exempt. Chewing gum, that doesn't really help you nutritionally one way or another, that's exempt. Alcohol, all food in restaurants is exempt. So you really won't know which foods you're getting that contain GMOs and which don't. Furthermore, this labels the process, not the end product. So when you're consuming a food that might have been produced with genetic engineering, that doesn't really tell you if it contains GMOs or not. And the foods are just as healthy as their organic counterparts. This initiative conflicts with those national labeling standards on organic and non-GMO project labeled foods. As a consumer, you already have that choice when you go to the grocery store. So we want a clear label that's fair for Colorado farmers and ranchers to compete with other farmers and ranchers around the nation, and tells a label that tells accurate information.
One point I would just add to that as well. One point you had mentioned about you want to look at labels because you want to know if it has the fat content, and you want to know probably sugar content and those other things that we all look for when we're looking for healthy foods. Proposition 105 doesn't have any impact on those. But when you do look at those labels, and it will tell you how much fat is in there, how many calories are in there, it tells you the exact amount, and it's reliable. Proposition 105 fails on both those tests. It doesn't tell you which ingredients are GMO and how much is GMO. And then, like we were mentioning earlier, sometimes it won't even be labeled just because it happens to get that special exemption.
Great. Again, if you have a question you want to ask, just press 0. Next up, we're going to go to Fred. Fred, are you there?
Yes.
Great. Go ahead and ask your question, sir.
I think my question's already been answered, but I'm a rancher, and I just wondered how this would affect my product, which is beef.
Fred, I can speak to this a little bit. With Proposition 105, a lot of things are exempt, including meat this year. But we also, it's a poorly written initiative, and there's a lot of things about it that are very confusing. We don't feel that 51% of food being exempt makes this worth passing. We feel like it imposes a lot of new costs on farmers, which will get passed on down the line, which would probably be where you would feel it. If your corn guys had to buy new equipment and stuff like that, if you were buying their feed, it would probably directly affect you that way. So even though beef is exempt, your costs are going to go up. And also just basically the cost of food at the grocery store is going to go up. We expected about $400 per family per year at a minimum. That's what it's going to go up.
Thanks so much. We're going to take our last poll question now for the night. And this question is, what concerns you most about Proposition 105? Push 1 on your phone if it's the impact on local farmers, 2 if it's the increasing grocery costs, 3 if it's the misleading labels, or 4 if it's all the above. Again, push 1 if it's the impact on local farmers, 2 if it's the increasing grocery costs, 3 if it's the misleading labels, and 4 if it's all the above. And I'm going to jump in here with a quick question that I think would be good for Dana. How do they plan to enforce Proposition 105? I mean, how do they do this?
Well, that's one of the many things that the proponents left out of here because, under Proposition 105, bureaucrats are going to have to write literally hundreds of pages of regulations, and then they're going to have to enforce them. And what that will mean is that they're going to have to inspect thousands upon thousands of farms across the entire state and tens of thousands of food products in tens of thousands of stores across the state. But yet there is no funding mechanism that's identified for this, so it would mean that it would have to come out of existing state revenues, nor is there a limit of taxpayer money that can be spent on this. I mean, studies in other states similar to the size of Colorado have looked at this, and they've indicated that it costs upwards of $20 million a year to regulate and enforce this labeling proposal, which makes sense because there has to be testing and enforcement at every step of the food chain, and taxpayers are on the hook for that.
Great. Again, if you have a question, just press 0. We're going to take our next question from Darren. Darren, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead. Ask your question.
Yeah, my question is, how can we say GMOs? How can we say GMOs are safe when they're sprayed with pesticides and herbicides? And my other question is, as a consumer, don't I have the right to know what I'm going to be eating? That's.
You know, Darren, you asked some interesting questions, and all crops use pesticides and herbicides and different cropping techniques to control weeds and insects. So that's not limited to just GMOs. That's how we produce our food. You know, even in my own garden, we use different foods and different techniques to manage bugs and weeds and stuff like that. So, you know, that's not limited to GE or non-GE plants. What this is going to do, though, is it's going to hurt our family farmers by putting them at a competitive disadvantage against those farmers in other states. Like Dana said, you know, a new state bureaucracy is going to have to be written that's going to cost millions of dollars. I think the Blue Book way understates what the cost is in Colorado. If you look at the cost of the Colorado Department of Agriculture just to make sure our 180 organic farms in Colorado are in compliance. They have 3 full-time employees for that and a budget of $370,000 per year. Now take those 180 farms and extrapolate that to 36,000 farms across Colorado. This is going to cost a great deal of money for our state.
Yeah, that's a great question and great answer. So if you have a question, again, press 0 on your phone. If you want to learn more, you can go to factsabout105.com. We have our next question from Diana. Diana, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great.
I
go ahead
want
with
to
your
know
question.
why. I was listening to the costs, all of the costs that you're bringing forth, and all the regulation. That needs to be in an ad, letting people know how much it's going to cost our state to put this together. The regulations alone are just unbelievable. So when you see a large cost that's going to hit the taxpayers, I think that's a plus for you to have that on an advertisement.
Diana, this is Dana. You know, you make a good point, and I think that's something that the campaign has to really take a serious look at because the costs are real. You know, we talk a lot about the cost to farmers, and Chad and Lori have talked a lot about that, the entirely different separate systems for that. Same thing for Colorado food producers or anybody who wants to sell food in Colorado. Entirely different systems just for the Colorado food, and then there's a different system for all other foods in the rest of the country. So we know about those costs, and of course, all those costs get pushed down to consumers at the grocery store. But you're right, this is a higher cost to taxpayers as well. There's no funding source identified or a limit of the money that can be spent. And so I think that that's an important point that you make, and thank you for that advice. We appreciate that. So thank you.
Again, if you have a question, just press 0. Next up, we're going to take Judy from Pueblo. Judy, are you there?
Yes. I want to know who is going to benefit monetarily if this passes. The public isn't, the state of Colorado isn't, the farmers isn't. So who in the heck is going to benefit monetarily? Who's pushing to pass this in our state?
Hi, Judy. It's Dana. I'll answer this, and I know Lori has some points probably that she would like to make on this as well. But yeah, you were exactly right. As Chad and Lori will tell you, it's not going to be Colorado farmers, and certainly not Colorado consumers who have to pay more at the grocery store for inaccurate, misleading labels or taxpayers. So, you know, it's when you look at who's going after this and who wants to make this happen, it's nobody within the state of Colorado. It isn't the Colorado Farm Bureau. It isn't all the local farm bureaus. It's out-of-state companies that have been pushing this agenda around in other states. I mean, it's Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps and, you know, Mercola that sells these supplements. Those are the folks who want to do this, and they've brought this initiative. A number of other states have all rejected it, and now they brought it to Colorado. And I think it's a shame because it's all costs and no benefits.
And, Judy, I'd just like to add to that. This is Lori. This is definitely going to make the food bill for your family go up quite a bit. We're expecting at least $400 a year per family. And so as far as benefits, I see absolutely none. I see a lot of confusion on labeling and I also see increased costs on several levels for our state.
Great. If you have a question, go ahead and press 0 on your phone. We're going to take our next question from Bill in Steamboat Springs. Bill, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead with your question, sir.
Well, one of your spokespeople mentioned that you can now tell non-GMO and GMO products on the store from, it's marked or labeled somehow. And I'd like to know how that's done. And the second question is, one of you mentioned that Europe doesn't limit GMOs, and then another spokesperson says that Europe's at a higher cost because they do that. So I'd like you to square that for me.
Hey, Bill, I'll answer both of those questions. So the first question you raised is how are there labels that already identify foods that are GMO-free? And there's 2 labels, and they're both nationwide labels, and which I think is an important point because something that I think is very critical is that all farmers and food producers and consumers should be treated equally. And the way you achieve that is you have labeling standards set at the federal level, which is really the way the overwhelming majority of our labeling standards are set right now. So for consumers who prefer foods without GMO ingredients in them, they can look for the organic label or the non-GMO label. Both of those reliably tell consumers that their food was not made with any genetic material in it, and it doesn't have all the exemptions and loopholes that the Proposition 105 has. Then the second question you asked was about the EU and how does that work. Well, Proposition 105 and the labeling standards in the EU are very different. For example, there's a zero tolerance in Proposition 105. Well, labeling standards in the EU and, in fact, in other countries that have them, the tolerance levels vary. They can go anywhere from 0.9% all the way up to 5%. Proposition 105 doesn't allow for that. Also, the labels in the EU, they actually tell you which ingredients are genetically engineered. Proposition 105 doesn't do that. It doesn't tell you which ingredients are genetically engineered and how much of them is genetically engineered. So there are different proposals, and again, you're talking there about entire countries. This is 1/50th of a country, and that's where the real cost and the burden comes for Colorado consumers and farmers. And that's why our coalition has come together, and we're urging a no vote.
And, many of you have your ballots in your hands right now, so we really do encourage you to fill out your ballot, vote no on Proposition 105, and send it back as soon as you can. Again, if you have a question, press 0. Our next question comes from Dick in Evans. Dick, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. Well, go ahead and ask your question, sir.
Okay. Well, the first question I was going to ask has already been answered, is who is behind all this nonsense. And the second is a statement, and I'm retired. I'm not a farmer. I am not a stakeholder. But I would like to see some of your commercials, if it's not too late in the game, relate the cost to the taxpayer and the consumer of what all of this nonsense is going to go on, because there's going to be a big layer of bureaucracy and a bunch of political hacks that don't know what they're doing that's going to administer it. And I guess that's about all I got to say.
Hey, Dick, I'll make a quick comment about that. You are the second person who's mentioned that to us tonight about the taxpayer costs, and that's a real cost. And I think that, therefore, is something we've got to take a serious look at, because people also think about their grocery costs, but then they don't often go to thinking about how this really costs taxpayers, and that's where the costs really are. So thank you again. I really appreciate that advice.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money, and I think that's why we have such a broad coalition. If you go to noon105.com and click on the link that lists our coalition members, it's the major Metro Chamber of Commerce, the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, Loveland, Lakewood, Pueblo, Grand Junction, groups like Action 22, Club 20, Progressive 15. You'll see a majority of your agricultural organizations, the Farm Bureau, cattlemen's, wheat growers, all across the state. And in addition to that, in addition to all of our coalition partners in this, we've seen an outpouring support from nonpartisan editorial boards who have listened to both sides of the issue, and they've seen that this issue gets recycled again and again. And Denver Post sided with the No on Proposition 105 campaign, the Pueblo Chieftain, Aurora Sentinel, Greeley Tribune, Steamboat Today, Longmont Times Call, Durango Herald, just to name a few of them. So I really encourage you, you've got your ballot, fill it out with a no vote, join Colorado's Farmers and Ranchers, and get that back to the ballot box by November 4th.
I would agree with that. This is Lori Kester. I think that if we just sort of excite the people around us to help them understand why this is such a big deal and help them see what it's going to cost them, it's not going to be that hard to get them to see what this is really going to do. So, as Chad said, just make sure that you really spread the word to your friends and family that when they go to vote, to really take a look at some of these things that we're talking about, the impact on the local farmers, your increasing grocery costs, your misleading labels, all of these things. Definitely consider that when you go to the ballot box, and please vote no.
You know, everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening and having this discussion on this very important measure. You know, we talked a lot about, all the aspects of it, that it doesn't give the information which it promised us to give. And, in fact, it gives misleading and inaccurate information because of all the exemptions and special loopholes. But what it will do is increase the cost of groceries just for Colorado consumers because it's a Colorado-only proposal, and it increased costs for Colorado taxpayers because got to foot the bill to regulate this at the same time. And there's Colorado family farmers who are overwhelmingly united in urging a no vote on this costly measure. It's all cost and no benefit. So we thank all of you for joining us tonight for this discussion. And just want to remind you again, please vote no on Proposition 105. This is a costly measure, and it's important that people really voice their opinion on this and cast their ballots before Halloween and urge a no vote on Proposition 105. Thanks so much for spending some of your evening with us. We really do appreciate it.
And thanks, Dana and Lori and Chad, for all your great comments tonight. Again, please fill out your ballot, vote no on Proposition 105, and mail it back in. It has to arrive by November 4th, so you don't want to mail it any later than Halloween. So please send that ballot back in. If we didn't get your question tonight, we're going to put everyone into a voicemail so that you can leave your question or your comment, and someone from the No on 105 campaign will follow up with you. So again, thanks for your time and have a great